So today we're talking about carbon footprints. Without further ado, I'm going to call on stage my panelists, and I'm going to start with Josie. Hi, Josie.
Hi, how's it going?
Josie, you're now in the UK, but you're actually one of the founders of Capture that you started in Singapore. Can you just introduce a bit about yourself and also Capture?
For sure, yes. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm Josie, co-founder of Capture. So we really started Capture with this goal to help people who were worried about climate change, but not really sure what difference they could make, what impact their everyday actions had. So we built Fitbit for your carbon footprint, if you like, which we launched January of this year. A bit about myself. I'm originally from the UK, spent 7 years in Asia and recently returned to the UK. So I'm working here remotely with the rest of our team.
Nice. Okay, so we have someone from the UK here. I'm going to call on stage Emily. Emily also is based in the UK.
Emily, hi, Paula, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have you. So Emily, we met in London actually when we were preparing Conscious Festival in London. I think that was back in March or something. And since then, I think you evolved into other rounds of consciousness. So you're also a founder. You founded Saving the Grace and also an app which is called Quantum in 2020, which is all about finding the conscious spaces in London. So can you just give us more background about your ventures and where your head is at the moment?
Yeah, so I started Saving the Grace as a conscious living platform to raise awareness about the world's waters. I thought it was a topic of discussion that wasn't really being spoken about. And that's been focusing on lifestyle, food, fashion, wellness, and how we can act in the world. I'm going through a slight rebranding at the moment towards more a sustainable consultancy for water regeneration. And then as a result of Saving the Grace, I was asked a lot about, where was I buying sustainable clothes and where was I eating? And so I created Quantum, launched a prototype, which is a sustainable city guide for London. So you can find over 190 restaurants, different shops and events happening in the city. So that's what I'm up to at the moment. So yeah.
Beautiful. And we're going to talk about carbon footprint after. Thank you, Emily. So Laura, if you can also, Josie, stay with us because we're going to just have you throughout the conversation. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Paula.
So where are you tuning in from today?
Well, I'm tuning in from Amsterdam. I am the CSR manager of Mud Jeans, and Mud Jeans is a circular denim brand. So basically, we make new jeans out of old jeans, and we apply circular economy principles across our entire business model.
Nice. And we actually love Mud Jeans, and we actually released now a video that we created in Paris, mixing up together different conscious brands, including Mud Jeans, and we just released it today on our Facebook. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it. And I'm going to call on stage Simon. Hopefully he's with us because we had a bit of issues with the tech. Okay, so let's go back on the topic of today. So the topic of today is carbon footprint, and we're going to see, why does our carbon footprint matter and how can we calculate it both from an individual point of view and also company point of view. So I'm going to start with you, Josie, because Josie, you have amazing insights on your website. Actually, you have a blog on Capture all about how to calculate your carbon footprint, which is great. So why does our carbon footprint matter?
For sure. So first of all, I just wanted to dive into the term carbon footprint a little bit more. So carbon footprint. So this basically includes greenhouse gas emissions. So if you think about the main greenhouse gases, it's not just CO2, there's also methane or nitrous oxide. So often it'll be the greenhouse gas emissions that are linked to our lifestyle choices as individuals. So you probably heard, or hopefully a lot of our listeners have heard the term carbon footprint, but they might have heard it in the individual sense. So like my carbon footprint as an individual is, 10 tons, 12 tons, whatever it is. Or they might see things such as the carbon footprint of a pair of jeans is X amount. So we can talk about the carbon footprint of our whole lifestyle, or we can talk about the carbon footprint of individual goods and services. So, but where does this term, I think, why is this term important? I think that's very much because each everything that we do in our lives has some kind of an environmental consequence. So if you think about something that you purchase, you would then look down the supply chain of, okay, well, where did the ingredients come from? Where did the materials come from? What energy was used to manufacture this good? How did it get to the shop? How did it get to my home? So each of these decisions comes with, sort of a chain of CO2 emissions that can then be attributed to that good. And then indeed, in terms of our sort of own lives, because we're living in a society that's powered by fossil fuels, basically, when we're looking at goods or services, they're going to come with a corresponding carbon footprint or carbon emission. It's not the case that all carbon footprints are bad, but it's simply basically a measure to help us be more aware of the emissions that relate back to our personal choices.
So anything we do has a carbon footprint associated with it, even the simple fact of breathing in and out. And you also shared with me a very interesting article that you wrote about the genesis of the expression carbon footprint, where it was actually coming from. And I got really shocked, actually, but after all, not super surprised. Can you just go back on that genesis?
Yes. So, yeah, as a lot of people may be surprised to hear. So the term carbon footprint was actually popularized by BP, British Petroleum, in 2004. So BP worked with Ogilvy and Mather to produce a genius advertising campaign that basically encouraged people to learn what their carbon footprint was. So BP had a website, they've since taken it down, but where you could go in and you could enter sort of different things about your life, and they would show you what your carbon footprint was. Why did they do that? So if you think about it, if you're a large oil and gas producer, it really works in your favor to have people feeling that their individual choices are the problem. So basically what they were encouraging people to do is to focus on reducing their personal consumption rather than asking what, and how are our personal consumption choices powered? So sort of, I think that's kind of obviously a really important question that we needed to be asking, and I'm sure we can discuss a bit further today. But we basically concluded the article with switch off the lights if you need to, but don't forget to switch your energy to a renewable source whilst you're at it, right? So the key thing is to look at not just reducing energy usage and all the other things we need to do, but it's actually questioning where is our energy coming from in the first place. So yeah.
Very interesting, this power dynamics between, what the system is doing and what we feel as individuals and the guilt we're having on a day-to-day basis. And if there is one brand which is actually taking accountability for its carbon footprint, it's Mud Jeans. So Laura, can you just tell us about more Mud Jeans again? Because I think it's a very interesting system, yet a bit complicated for people who don't really know. And also, can you tell us, how do you measure your carbon footprint?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are circular, and I briefly explained that we make new jeans out of old jeans. But the way it works is that we actually have a system called the Lease a Jeans program, where our customers are encouraged to lease the jeans instead of purchasing them. And as part of that is sort of a non-binding agreement where our customers agree to send us back the jeans at the end of life or when they no longer want to use them, so that we can then recycle them and reincorporate them into production. But then, of course, there's other sort of circularity principles that are incorporated into our business model. So, for example, also the materials we use only GOTS certified organic cotton, and well, also the recycled content that we collect. We use innovative techniques to dye the product, to dye the jeans, and that means that we use less water and less CO2. And overall, we managed to create a pair of jeans that has a significantly lower impact than the industry standard, which is great because as part of our mission is to strive for a world without waste. And our listeners might know this, but a pair of jeans is actually one of the dirtiest garments in our closet. So making a better product available to our customers is always fantastic. So in terms of how we measure our CO2 impact, we first worked with a company called Blue Dot in 2016. And with their collaboration, we really measured sort of everything. So from cotton all the way to that product being made, to it being shipped to our customers, to our offices, to the energy that we were using, the internet, everything. So that we could take those values and then also use it to offset our impact, because that was also part of our target. We wanted to be carbon neutral, so and continue to reduce our impact over the years. And then in 2019, I'll be quick, sorry if I'm talking too much, we worked with another company called EcoChain, and recently we released another assessment of our impact, but that was more from what we call cradle to gate. So it means really from the custom bulb all the way down to the final product. And we were really happy to see that we had reduced our impact significantly, and that our impact is actually 70% less than industry standard from a CO2 perspective. So that was great to see.
Amazing. And please, just if you have anything to add, just continue, because it's very interesting. And it looks like also, conscious brands nowadays just, value collaborations. And it looked like you just collaborated with different companies whose job was to do that. And that's wonderful. And that brings me to my last speaker, Simon, who finally could join. Hi, Simon. I just want to check if, you can speak.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Great. So Simon, yeah, great. So Simon, you're based in Singapore, and you're actually an assistant professor at SMU. And you're also one of the founders of Green, which is a startup which built handprints, which you're going to tell us all about. And bouncing back on collaboration, we actually collaborated with Green in order to launch a carbon calculator for conscious brands, which we'll go through with you at the end of the discussion, which we are really super excited about. And Simon contributed massively on that. But just to continue on the conversation about carbon footprints and, climate change, Simon, can you just go back in your own words as a professor? What does it mean, carbon footprint, and why is it important in your own words?
So, a carbon footprint, in my own words, is basically an accounting tool that helps you keep track of all the damage you do to the world by default, simply because most of our energy systems and the way we produce goods and services are currently unsustainable. And so by keeping track and providing accurate measurements like Capture is doing, you can hopefully start improving on what you're doing. So if you just use your footprint as a way to kind of account for your historical sins, then it's not really useful for an organization. It becomes really useful when you're measuring, improving, keeping track of all the little things, and then making strategic decisions that will help you reduce your carbon footprint. So I think this is one important part. And of course, we at Handprint are focusing more on the other part as well. We can talk about that later.
What do you do at Handprint, sorry, not Footprints?
So for us, we basically started Handprint about a year ago after one of the co-founders and I had worked for quite a while on a startup in reforestation. And so our key concern with focusing on footprint was that you're focusing on the negative. And it's very good if you actually use it in the right way I was trying to describe. But for most people, focusing on the negative isn't very exciting. And when you're focusing on the idea of like, oh, we have a footprint and we have to alleviate that footprint or kind of offset our footprint, then the highest goal you can strive for is zero, because then you're carbon neutral and you don't have a footprint anymore. But zero as a goal is just not very sexy, and it didn't really appeal to us. So we basically said, like, let's focus on all the positive stuff you can do and just call that handprint. Whereas the footprint is where you step on by default, handprint is what you do with your hands deliberately in order to have a positive impact. And so we believe this narrative and this approach that really focuses on, hey, I know there's a lot of bad stuff going on, and most of it is kind of outside of your control, right? You're using electricity, you're driving a car, or you're taking a taxi ride, and you can't really control the fact that this is causing serious damage. So focusing on that is helpful, but maybe not very exciting. So when you're focusing on just like, hey, this is all the positive stuff we can do, we think that's a more exciting conversation to have with brands. And especially if you're already like a conscious brand, like obviously all of the Green is the New Black members, they've probably already done most of what they can, like Laura was describing, in order to kind of reduce the negative as much as possible. So we want to come in and say, let's have a conversation about all the great positive stuff you can do on top of that. And hopefully that's going to appeal to many customers.
Amazing. So another ways of collaboration between maybe Mud Jeans and the handprint. So Laura, just to come back on the story, so you just mentioned, the different milestones you went through, but, if you had to share to some conscious brands which are looking at us today, and especially fashion brands, what were the biggest challenges you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, sure. Oh, sorry, Simon. Well, sort of backing up a little bit also on some of Simon's comment, which is like the positive doing. I think that's really spot on, because I think that's so important. Also, that's something that we are also working on in Mud Jeans, is that our 2020 goal, or 2021 now, because some delays with some of the projects, but it is to be carbon positive, I think. And that changes a lot the connotation of how we interact with the concept of carbon footprint. And yeah, just to have that quick statement, I think it's really great to change the way that we think about it. But for us as a brand, and the thing about CO2 is that, it just really feels like an elephant in the room that you have to deal with, and it can be very overwhelming. So for us, we were very lucky because we, again, collaborated with this company called EcoChain that were really like the math geniuses behind collaborating, behind calculating everything. But that's not to say that there weren't challenges. Of course, we had to go and talk to our supply chain partners, and it requires a great deal of transparency from your supply chain partners, because it was really based on actual values and not so much estimates, right? So they shared with us all of the chemicals they're using, all of the energy that they're using, water, everything, so that then with the help of EcoChain, we could have a more sort of real understanding of the impact and where it is, so that we could set targets and focus on improvements in the long run, right? And I think for some brands, that in itself can be quite challenging to have that transparency with their supply chain partners. Again, we were very lucky because as part of our business model, we just have a very small supply chain to allow greater transparency. So we had a very open conversation and a lot of transparency with our partners. But even then, with one of them, we had the issue that at the time that we were asking for these values, is that, look, we're really sorry, but right now we're changing management in our sustainability team, and we just don't have the capacity to give you these values right now. And we said, okay. So we used industry standard values. So in that, you already have an issue that you are basing your values on industry standard. And as a sustainable brand, you're like, okay, well, we know that maybe here some things are better. It just affects the overall calculation. And that's in itself challenging. But as a recommendation, and here I conclude my statement, but is that as a brand, I think it's so important to have a very close relationship with your supply chain partners, so that when it comes to these type of calculations and also any type of production innovation, it is easier to incentivize that and work towards that.
It might not be easy when you're big brands and you have so many different suppliers, actually. So how many, can you just walk us through a bit of more your operations, actually? How many suppliers do you work with, and sure, how do you select them, just very briefly?
Sure. So it's really simple. We only have three. One is called Recover Tex. That's where our jeans are recycled and shredded. Then Tejidos Rollo, these two are both based in Spain. They take the new yarn that is made and they dye it and turn it into fabric. And then the last one is Ustex International. They are based in Tunisia, and there they do all the stitching and sort of the final production of the jeans, the wash and the looks and those type of things. And that's it.
Nice. Yeah. So it's very easier to have a control over your suppliers. Exactly. So let's see a bit the carbon footprint aspect, where it was coming from, how can we calculate it as a brand? but what about as individuals? So I'm here with Emily, who's coming from, the individual point of view. So how do you calculate your carbon footprint on a day-to-day basis? And is it something that you care about? Is it something that creates anxiety? Like, how do you cope with, the world carbon footprint in general?
Yes, I mean, there's a million kind of carbon footprint calculators out there, and I think I've tried numerous ones, but now there are all these new apps. Discovered one the other day called Yayzy, Yayzy, and what I love about it is that you can directly track your footprint also through your bank spending, and you can offset it directly, so you can then have the positive impact rather than just knowing that you're making this negative impact in the world. You can also link you to forestation projects and agricultural soil regenerative projects, which I think is great to turn this kind of negative guilt aspect of carbon footprint into what can we actually do about it. And you can compare your footprint to the average UK citizen, which I think is like 7 or 8 tons, and I think Hong Kong's like 13.44 tons of carbon footprint, which seems crazy, but there's also, it compares it to the UN guidelines of what we need to be trying to aim for. And I think it's just a way of kind of keeping us accountable, but making us feel like we can actually make a positive difference. There's some other great ones online as well, but Yayzy is definitely the best one I found that turns the guilt into optimism for sure.
Amazing. So that's an app you're using, and it just helps you to release your eco-anxiety if you have any, or do you do any other stuff to offset your carbon?
Yeah, definitely. There's I think eco-anxiety is definitely something that if you're in the space, is probably something that everyone's experienced. If you have this drive to be sustainable, there's definitely some element, but I'm feel really optimistic about the space because there's so many amazing different apps out there, like Tree app. You can just answer a question every day and plant a tree. You Capture, Ecosia. There's always amazing businesses now that are making it easier for us to make a difference. Because unfortunately, the world seems to be set up for us to fail in the carbon space. And actually, several issues I've been grappling with over lockdown is I went fully vegan a few years ago from different health issues, and I'd completely cut out meat. But over lockdown, I was with my family who seemed to eat a lot of meat, and I started to eat meat and actually started to feel like that it was actually feeling better for my body. So I think this sometimes all or nothing extreme approach isn't the be all and end all. I think it's just about having more consciousness and where are we sourcing things from, and potentially finding a middle ground that also works to be kind of optimistic in reducing our carbon footprint. Obviously, cows are one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters for the planet. I think they produce more than cars overall. But I've also been learning quite a bit about regenerative farming, and cows can also play an important part for carbon capture through the soil. So I think the carbon footprint conversation actually is actually much more nuanced and complex than just like, here's your footprint and this is the guilt that you need to have. And I think that's why these discussions are really important to have, so that we can see it through different lenses. Yeah.
I love how the sustainability community and conscious community is shifting from, being scared and, it's all doom and gloom to, more optimistic and also realistic, but more optimistic in just saying, we can just see things differently and just portraying them in a more positive way. And talking about app, Josie, also you founded Capture, as you explained earlier. Can you just go back on your journey as an entrepreneur? Why did you get this idea, and how did you create it? And you also have a founder, so can you just walk us through your experience as an entrepreneur?
Sure, absolutely, yes. So I got started in this area. In my previous job, I worked with Indigenous communities and spent some time in sort of Mongolia and Kalimantan and remote areas, and I saw the effects of climate change that were being experienced today. And I don't know about, you guys and our listeners, but when I was at school, I was always taught about climate change as something that was going to happen in the future. So yeah, it was obviously quite a big shock to see that it was already happening. I started to look at the impact of my, decisions and behaviors. And I came across this amazing website called Shame Plane. It's like SHAME plane.com. I think I've spoken about it a couple of times before, and it showed you how much Arctic ice the emissions from your seat on a flight were causing. And it was just a huge wake-up call for me, that kind of my individual actions were having this, this much effect. And then I started to look into like what's the sort of profile of my life, or what can I do to improve? And I realized that there were so many other people who also felt the same way, confused about climate change, wanting to make a difference, but not really knowing where to start. So we started to look at the role that technology had played to help people in other similar areas of life, such as health and fitness. And that's sort of what inspired us to look at kind of that tracking goal-based app concept that we're all familiar with for different parts of our lives, and to look at repurposing that for our carbon emissions. So that's what we started out with. When we launched, we decided to basically, and all of these apps have sort of different challenges. There are different ways of collecting data. So Emily mentioned an app called Yazy. There are a couple of apps like this, whereby what they do is they link to your bank account, and then they're able to see how much you spent and where. They can't see what you purchased. That's really difficult to obtain in terms of data. So they'll be able to see, $20 Walmart. They can't see if that's $20 or hamburgers or vegetables, but they can see the vendor, and they can see the amount, and that's really helpful. And because you can start to put those vendors in different CO2 categories. So we looked at that being one approach. We looked at the approach of having people enter in information, but that's quite cumbersome for folks to remember to do. Then we decided to take a different approach instead, and look at kind of different elements of an individual's carbon footprint. So we divided it into four. You would have emissions from your dietary choices, emissions from transportation, home energy usage, and then goods and services. And we decided to basically go kind of one by one through these categories. So far, we started with transportation. So my co-founder, Aziz, who I met in Singapore last year, he created an algorithm that's able to predict your mode of transport based on how you are moving. So we're able to say, okay, that looked like a bus journey, a car journey, a train journey, etc., and kind of keep a running tally of emissions for those. Help you set a target based on 7.6% reduction year on year, and then basically show that sort of filling up throughout the month. We also have offsetting projects, but we didn't want to, and kind of the journey that we've been through as an entrepreneur, we didn't want to tie our revenue generating solely to carbon offsets, because we can talk about this quite a lot, but we didn't feel so comfortable having that as our sole way of making revenue. So we had inquiries from businesses asking if they could use Capture for teams to help them build and engage a planet-friendly workforce remotely, and that's basically what we're doing now. We still have our consumer app out there, of course, as well.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask you, what's your business model, and how is it to ask people or brands for money when it comes to sustainability topics, because that's like an overall topic in general as an entrepreneur, if you can just go back on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the way that we got into this, so we actually had people using the Capture app for individuals and saying, hey, can I try this with our team? So we realized that there was definitely something there. And sustainability for organizations is obviously a huge, huge topic. And we wanted to focus on a piece of that topic, which was getting your employees engaged and involved as well. So that's basically what we chose to focus in on. So to help organizations build and engage a planet-friendly workforce. And then we basically charge, as kind of any other like HR engagement software we charge. So it's on an per employee per month basis. But the specific strategy that we use for that, for entrepreneurs out there, is called a product-led growth strategy. So basically you put a product out there for free to the public, and then you focus on converting a percentage of those into like paid enterprise users. So it's the same way that like Slack and Dropbox and Calendly and other products like that have done it.
Thank you for that. Product-led growth. So we have a nice comment from Heather. So she says, I'm looking for Capture on the US App Store, but she cannot see it, but it sounds amazing. So where is it available?
If if you search for carbon footprint and CO2 tracker, I know it's a bit powerful, you'll find us. There's also a story behind that. So because capture is quite a common name, we knew that most people would find us kind of organically. So what we've tried to go for is basically anyone that searches for CO2 tracker, carbon footprint tracker, you should find us kind of like in sort of the one of the top 3 there. If you search for capture, you will get camera apps. So it was sort of a bit of a deliberate strategy to sort of catch people that were already looking for something that we've created. So yeah, carbon footprint.
Another tip for entrepreneurs. Thank you. So Simon, also you created a tool which is more dedicated to businesses. Can you just go back also on the technology you're using? Because I think you're using blockchain. So by doing so, can you just also go back on a bit of blockchain for dummies? Because that would be helpful for also me to understand how do you use blockchain to gather your data.
Okay, so there's and this is probably like a 2-hour answer condensed in 2 minutes or something. So, so we use a variety of technology. So the way you can think about Handprint is that it's a platform that enables companies to find positive impact projects that they like. For instance, reforestation projects, but it could also be plastic removal from the ocean. It could be an education project somewhere. It could be coral reef protection. And so Handprint basically connects those two like a platform where the company can come and say like, okay, I'm interested in integrating some positive impact into my sales process. So let's say you're on an e-commerce platform and you can just, by the time you're reaching your bill, you're checking out, the company has the option to use our widget to just say, okay, cool, based on this bill of $200, I'm gonna dedicate 1% of the revenue goes to reforestation. And so we instantly make that possible. And on top of that, we enable the customer, the consumer, to say, hey, I like this. This is really cool. You're basically doing a $2 donation based on my purchase. I'm going to top up $2 as well. And so then, as a consequence, $4 in that purchase is going to, let's say, reforestation. And then what we do with Handprint is then we keep track of the individual consumer's contributions, both directly, as in the money that the consumer spends, but also indirectly. Basically, the money that is spent because the consumer has made a purchase. And that becomes your Handprint. Now, in order to keep track of all these all this information, these metrics, we've designed with my NGO a blockchain system that currently really works in 2 ways. And it's specifically designed for reforestation projects. So it creates financial transparency. So the moment that you as a donor give money to a specific project, you will be able to see how that money moves in between different banks, in between different organizations, until it reaches the planter and the NGO planting and even the individual planter. Now, creating that kind of transparency is incredibly difficult in lots of the markets where reforestation is very important. So the technology behind this is quite complex, but we're going to make it really easy to see. So that's an advantage. And then we're working with satellite companies and machine learning so that we can use satellites to look at the forest, take measurements, and then capture, to use that beautiful word, capture how much CO2 is actually being absorbed in this forest. We're using machine learning in order to be able to do this in a very low cost way. And so what we can then do is say, okay, based on this forest that we have with loads of different companies, for instance, have been able to plant, we can then measure, okay, this forest in the last year has absorbed this much carbon, which we then tokenize. So we create little carbon tokens that we can send back to the individuals and the companies that have contributed to this forest. That also happens on the blockchain. Now, there's a lot of technical explanation of why this happens on the blockchain, and I'm very happy to get into this with people who are interested, but I think this is really the core. So the idea is establish a direct connection between what a brand wants to do and what it wants to be known for, and a variety of projects that meet those kind of criteria, right? So that align with the company's purpose, and then integrate that purpose in a very simple way in the company's processes. And so right now we're working on sales, where we've already been approached by companies, by cities, and by big services companies that say, hey, can we embed this in other processes like email? Or can we create another business process where we can just constantly remind our employees like, hey, we're currently with the entire company, we're trying to plant 1 million trees in 3 months. So let everyone in your circle know about this, and they can just click on this link and they can join our reforestation event.
That's amazing. A lot of words that I'm not fully clear on, like machine learning, blockchain, but yeah, that was definitely clear. So thank you for that. And again, if you have any questions, guys, you can just put them in the chat, and we're going to have at the end a networking session where Simon will be on one room. So if you have further questions about everything, you can ask him. And actually, just to stay with you, Simon, because you just launched recently, and it was just after COVID, and people just rethinking their lifestyles, understanding more about their footprint, etc. Did you see like a great traction? And I'm going to ask the same question to Josie, Laura, and actually Emily. Just like, how did you see the awareness growing after the COVID? And we're still in the pandemic, but yeah, after just like the big hits.
Well, yeah, I think we're still in the pandemic, but actually we have found, both with the NGO as with Handprint, that we've actually been able to have loads of conversations with people that are interested. And I think what COVID made people realize is that something that can start in a very small village, well, it's not that small, but that starts somewhere in China, can become something that affects everyone's life in a very fundamental way at a very short time. And that's an interesting realization, because in many ways, what's happening with climate change is 10 or 100 times worse. And so the realization that the global community can, to a certain extent, with some exceptions, kind of come together, realize like, okay, this is the fight we have to win, that people are willing to sacrifice enormous personal freedom in order to achieve that victory is, I think, very promising, and gives me hope that we can also find a way to address climate change. And in our own experience in talking with companies and being approached by different organizations and by individuals when talking about Handprint, we just see so much enthusiasm, both at the corporate and the individual level. Okay, like, oh, this is something exciting, this can work. Also, even in the fundraising, everything is going very well at the moment. So I'm not sure if it's because of COVID, but I don't think COVID has really been a big barrier for us in that respect.
Amazing. What about you? Do you have any insight, Emily?
Yeah, I think with COVID, people have started to also get back to nature, and they realize that we do live on a green planet and a blue planet, and this is, our home. And people have suddenly had time to stop and think about how they're living their lives. Is it making them happy? What's the future for their children? And really about what they came here onto this planet to do. So I think people are having certainly me and people I speak to are having a reevaluation about life in general and the future of the planet. So I think it definitely has created more awareness for the better, although I don't think enough, people want to return to the normal. Like, there is going to be we have to create a new world going forward and help this transition, because we've gone back to, almost the previous greenhouse gas emissions as life gets started again. So yeah, I think we really need to, moving forward, think about, put what we were thinking about into practice and into business.
Yeah,
and certainly.
Thank you for that. Have you seen any big attractions, both guys, Josie and Laura, from your brand, just like people more interested into your or purchasing, a whooping increase into the sales? Laura, you've seen, and Josie into downloading your app. Let's start with you, Laura.
Well, absolutely, because our online platform is primarily, so the way we sell is primarily online, and the stores were obviously closed. So we did see that we were able to sustain sales quite well, but we were also very happy to see that because of our business model, where we don't have massive stock orders, and again, we have a close relationship with our supply chain partners, we were able to keep everything really well and steady unlike many of other sort of brands in the fashion industry, COVID sort of again re-highlighted very much the dirty side of the fashion industry from a social perspective in Inditex and all of these massive retail stores canceling their orders and having massive dead stock and causing a lot of people to be left without work in a very tough situation. So we were happy to see that our customers were supporting us even in this situation. But I'm also happy to see that there is a great push right now for sustainability in the fashion industry. Well, it's definitely picking up.
That's something which is really surprising because everybody's been talking about sustainability for a while, but it seems like in the fashion industry, even though we've been talking for a while, there's like very little things which have been implemented. So yeah, it seems like things are picking up, which is great. What about you, Josie? Have you seen a pickup in your downloads? Any good traction since the COVID?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest, we weren't really sure what exactly was going to happen because we launched, as you guys know, right? We launched an app that helps you track your emissions from daily mobility choices 2 months before the entire world was told to stop traveling and stay at home. So it was a slight curveball that was thrown at us, and we weren't really sure how people were going to react. But I think it's been great. Like we've seen consistently growing downloads. We've also been seeing inquiries from organizations coming in even during this time, which is fantastic to see. We've had businesses come and ask us what we can do to help promote sustainability amongst remotely based workforces, which is really exciting too. But yeah, I would say sort of in general, in terms of kind of COVID and the environment, it's definitely made us realize how vulnerable we are as humans. I think also it's helped us realize that massive change is possible. Like a lot of things, we can do that we previously thought, would never be possible. So I mean, that's good to see. And I think definitely, yes, things have bounced back in terms of emissions, as Emily mentioned, absolutely. But we should be on track this year for an 8% decrease in CO2 emissions. And it doesn't sound like much, even though the whole pandemic has happened, but actually that is good. It's a good thing because to make the 1.5 degree warming, I know, Simon, but it's something, right? To make the 1.5 degree warming target by 2030, everyone in the world needs to decrease emissions by 7.6% year on year. So no, 8%, it's tiny, and no, it's not enough. But if we were to continue decreasing emissions by around 8% each year on year, we should be able to make that 1.5 degree target, which in a way is, I think, kind of comforting that at least like we've done it for this year. Like, no, it's not how anybody would have wanted it to happen, but at least it has happened, or hopefully will happen by the end of the year.
Simon?
So, and I like this optimism, and I don't want to really sit on anyone's parade here, but the fact that we've only been able to reduce by 8% in a time where the entire world for months came to a full standstill, where flights, from Singapore went from 20 million to 400 passengers per month, just to give an example. Like the fact that it's only 8% really, really shows that all the things that really need to happen, the most important things are we have to electrify. We have, because driving and flying, basically, that clearly amounts to only like maybe 8 or 10%. So it's what we eat, and it's how we produce electricity, and it's and our heavy industries like construction. And so these are the things that we really need to have fundamental innovation in. And until we can do that, and we have to put heaps of money into this, but until we can do this, what is extremely important is that we support as much as possible solutions that indeed are going to increase the capacity of our Earth to absorb carbon, like we all do with like forestry projects, or clean stoves, or I don't know, maybe even carbon capture and storage, so it will be possible. But we need these solutions until we can really start tackling our fundamental primary and secondary industries.
That's another very interesting point in the fact that I get often caught up just because I'm flying sometimes. And people just say, how can you just possibly work into sustainability and still fly? That's again, just to go back on the guilt we just put on people, which is fair enough. I'm definitely working on flying less, and I haven't been flying because of COVID anyways. But it's true, just it's great to remind all of the big picture, just the fact that it's the way we produce our electricity and the way we eat, which also needs to be addressed as a priority. So we're coming to an end for the panel discussion, guys. If you have any questions on the side, we're going to be taking some questions. And before that, I wanted to introduce our new carbon calculator for brand that we co-created with Simon and his wonderful team. And also a huge thanks to Diane and Arsha from our team who've been working crazy on that. So Simon, if you would like to share your screen, we're going to walk you through this very easy questionnaire, which only takes a few minutes to fill up as a brand, provided you have the available data. And that would just then send you an email with a recap of your carbon footprint. And Simon, it would be great if you could just explain how you come up with the genius calculation.
Sure. So you can see the screen, right?
Yes, it's very small.
I think you can click on it twice and then it should become bigger.
I'm going to just paste it anyway onto our chat. But we can point.
Yeah, I think you click on what it says here to maximize video. So this is the carbon calculator that we've created with our team at Handprint and with Green is the New Black. So it's important that I caveat this. Like, so if you listen to what Josie was saying about like the incredible technology that they've designed to measure accurately how people move, and then take that information, see, okay, this is a car, this is a plane, this is a tram or a train or something. So if you're really doing a proper carbon calculation, it's very labor intensive, typically quite expensive, and you will always need to rely on like software, like life cycle analysis software from Bureau van Dijk or something. So all of this just to say that what we have created is something that is extremely basic and that makes a lot of coarse assumptions about industries and so, but it will give you some kind of idea and like at least something to work with if you want to have an idea about, okay, what is this carbon footprint of ours? So you'll first see a welcome screen. Then you'll have to fill in some basic details about your company. Let me just do that quickly for my own company without spending too much time on it. So if you do something like this and you don't really type in an actual email address, I got it in caps lock, then it will not work. So number of employees and revenue range. All right. So this is the first kind of basic questions. None of this information we actually really use to calculate your carbon footprint. Oh, there you go. It doesn't even recognize this kind of email address, although it is real. That's a little bug. All right, let's just do it like this, and then it will be fine. So the next thing we're going to ask is basically to make an estimate about the impact that your product that you're selling, or that the product that you're selling has on the planet. So what we're asking you is to give a lower range of the production costs and a higher range of the production costs, and we will take both into account. So if we do this at the level of an individual product or at the level of 100 products, that's up to you to really choose. So you're just giving an idea of the production costs, and then you figure out, okay, which industry are you in? We've at the moment only added 4 industries that are really key to Green is the New Black, but we've designed a calculator, the backend, with over 50 industries. So if you want something more detailed, please let me know, and we can help you with that. So this is food and beverages. And then we're asking you, in which country are you manufacturing? Now, the reason we ask that is because, so let's just make a logical guess, say that you're manufacturing in China, and then where you're distributing, okay, let's assume you're going to Australia. You can also add multiple countries if you want. So the reason we're asking these kind of questions is because we're using data from the International Energy Agency and international trade data to make an estimate about what is the carbon footprint of every US dollar in every industry in a specific country. So there's a complex calculation behind this, but basically what it allows us to do is make an estimate of if you're buying some kind of, let's say you're buying clothes or fabric in China, like on average, they will be associated with this kind of carbon emission. Okay, then we have a bunch of questions that relate to packaging and relate to the materials you use. Now, in terms of packaging, most of these questions really serve as reminders. Like these are things that you can actually have a conversation about with your suppliers. And so if you're saying yes to many of these questions, your carbon footprint will actually go down. The same thing with the materials, like to get a proper analysis of what is the actual materials in your product. So of course, you know, if you're a clothing company, you know, maybe a lot of it is cotton or you make it out of hemp. But to get some idea that it is broadly generalizable and it can be used both by an F&B company and by a clothing company and by a cosmetics company, we ask some general questions about which materials you're using. And so to what extent they're recyclable or what extent they have been recycled in the past, whether you have some kind of certificates. And all of this will, the more you can say yes to these questions, the lower your footprint will be as well. Then the key thing is the transport. And this is the one where you actually will need to maybe do a little bit of homework in terms of figuring out which data do you need. Because we don't need a monetary value in terms of transport. In order to estimate your responsibility as a company when you're doing transport, when you're doing international transport, we need to know how much kilograms you're transporting between two places. So you can select the mode of transport, for instance, truck, transporting, we said between 1,000 and 5,000. So assume this might be, 500 kilogram worth of products that goes from somewhere in China, we said. Am I getting, there you go. So let's say it goes from the ink one in China to, it takes a while to load apparently. This is going to get faster. There we go. So I'm trying to find Canberra in Australia. So, okay, there we go. So it goes to Canberra, Australia. You can add another mode of transport if you're basically want to say like, okay, we're driving from truck between these two places. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's say ship. But then from Canberra, we're going by truck. So you can add multiple iterations of this, and then this will give you an estimate of your carbon footprint. So you can do the calculation in the end, and then it will appear very coarsely, and hopefully, if it works. Well, it's not showing up. That is unfortunate. So that means that at the moment the system is set up only to basically email you the results. So I will get the email. In my email account, but eventually like a calculation that shows up here.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much, Simon.
That's it.
Great. So I don't know, guys, from the panel, that was the first time you were seeing the demo. What did you think about the tool?
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, really good.
It's amazing. Congratulations, guys. I think it's a really nice way, especially for smaller brands that don't necessarily have like a huge budget or like all the time to go through this just to like get started. It looks absolutely fantastic. So amazing job.
Yeah, completely. I think also, as Josie was saying, as a small brand, or even if you're just getting started, knowledge is power, as they say. So once you have an idea, then you can start taking action to improvements. So I think it's a great way to just get started.
Yeah, exactly. Came with the idea, and that's our also kind of vision at Green is the New Black, that sustainability is a journey, both for brands and individuals. Nobody is perfect, but you have to start somewhere. And it seemed like in the world of carbon footprint, there was no real tool to just help you to approximately calculate your carbon footprint as a brand. You had to go either to nothing or go to consultants who would be costing like an eye, would be super expensive. So we just decided to create this really quick tool for brands. And as you said, knowledge is power. So hopefully we just help our members, but also beyond, because this tool will be freely available for everyone. So I hope you can just like share the tool if you found it useful, and also because we just launched it. It's a beta version, so if you have any suggestions to improve it, please let us know, because we just love having some feedbacks. So it's the end of our panel. Yes, Simon, you wanted to say?
I'm just saying, once you have an idea about your footprint, you can come to Handprint. You can come to Handprint, or you can even go to Capture if you want to say like, okay, now we know what we know the damage we've done. Let's at least offset our damage, and then start doing some positive stuff as well.
For sure. I don't know, guys, if you have any final thoughts, maybe on your carbon footprint, just the key takeaway you would love our audience to leave with. Maybe let's start with you, Emily.
I think about it more in an optimistic way. I think the idea of carbon footprint is that humans are inherently bad for the planet, but actually we can do good. And I think that's the main thing of obviously reduction and offsetting, but also what can we do to regenerate the planet, whether that's through supporting regenerative farms or helping to reforest different areas or planting trees. There are many positive things that we can do, and I think that's where the carbon footprint conversation needs to move towards, is in the Handprint direction, as Simon's Handprint business is moving. So I think it's turning towards optimism
and opportunities.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, was that me?
If you can share the final key takeaway you would like the audience to leave with.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to just know what your carbon footprint is as a good starting point. I think where it can become dangerous is it distracts us from the fact that we also need to make systemic changes. Mm-hmm. So that's where it's like, again, turn up, switch off the lights, but also look at switching your energy provider, right? So it's just making sure that we're aware that it's not a distraction away from questioning where our energy comes from. That's ultimately what's making the biggest difference and the biggest impact. So that would be my point there. And then also just as a final point to sort of have a look at emission inequality and how sort of countries where individuals do have higher carbon footprints are often less vulnerable to climate change in there as well. So that's definitely another topic that I think is worth, if you're interested, sort of finding out more, to take a look into that as well.
Amazing. Laura, any final takeaway?
Yeah, I think, collaboration is key. I think, as I already mentioned, this carbon footprint thing is just this huge elephant in the room that it just becomes very intimidating. And by collaborating with people, it becomes sort of digestible, where you can understand where you can improve as a brand, but I think also as consumers and people with amazing platforms, whether it's what Josie's working on or Emily's, blog, where you can start to understand how you can start making improvements. And even as a brand, Simon, what you're doing is also amazing. It just becomes easier. And I think that type of collaboration and working together and making it a positive thing in terms of, okay, we can do this, I think is essential. And it just becomes less intimidating.
Exactly. Simon?
I think I can only second what everyone else has said. I liked what Emily was saying about the regenerative economy. This is really very core to what we're doing, and moving, at least trying to move away from the extractive economy that is damaging, and a more regenerative, restorative economy. I think the beginning with the carbon footprint is not a bad place to start. And so, using this tool or getting a bit more help in figuring out, like, how do we calculate this footprint and where can we actually really make changes, because that's really what it's about, is a good beginning. With Handprint, our goal is that in 2 years, when you're applying for a job in any company that cares about sustainability, they're going to ask you, what is your handprint? And it's going to be really important that you're going to be able to show, like, oh, this is actually all the positive stuff I've done because of my purchasing behavior, because of any kind of social activity I've done that I got sponsored for, and I've been able to keep track of all of the positive stuff that I've done through my personal behavior and my purchasing behavior. I think this would be, that's something to look forward to. If we can achieve that with Handprint, I'm going to be very happy, of course, but I also think it would be massive step forward for the world.
Nice. Love that. Do we have any question from the audience? Who has the first question? Because I saw one question. I think that was for you, Laura. I think it was from Linda. She was asking, could mudbeans be considered as a cradle-to-cradle system? And Simon replied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Simon's response is correct. We use cradle-to-cradle certified products in certain cases, but because we use recycled content, it is very difficult to become a cradle-to-cradle certified product because it's difficult to trace back exactly what's in that content. Then you have the GRS certification that the stuff that you are recycling is good and healthy and it's not going to harm your consumer. But there are just obstacles there to achieving the higher ranking of cradle-to-cradle certification.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I guess there's no further questions, so we're going to just now speak into, and stay with us guys, speak into the networking room. So you only have to click on the sessions, and then below, you're going to have on one room, Josie and Emily, and on the other room, Laura and Simon. No, sorry. Simon, Emily on one room, Josie, Laura on the other room. That's it.
Which room are they labeled with our names?
I think so. Let's just check. But let me just tell you otherwise. Stacy, do we have any? Yes, with your names. They're labeled with your names. Yeah,
perfect.
And then guys from the audience, so you can just put your video and also audio, so as you can ask directly the questions to the panelists. I will be just cruising around the different sessions. I hope you enjoyed the sessions. If you have any suggestions, any questions, you can just contact us. We have all our email address. I hope you liked it, and I wish you a great evening or a great afternoon from wherever you are in the world. See you.